back to the Graceology Podcast. My name is Andrew Governale. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm also here with Bekah Arias, another one of our co-hosts.
Hello.
And today we're going to be delving further into our discussion on Among Kings, the summer reading book for Grace Church of Laverne, written by Chris Jackson. And we're going to be expounding on the discussion of what it means to have thick skin, or as he puts it in the book, rhino skin.
So when I read this chapter, I thought it was a real interesting paradox. So Chris was saying that we need to have rhino skin, kind of that we're not easily offended, but underneath that, we still need to have a soft, and I think the word he used was pliable, which I kind of liked, a soft, pliable, kind of malleable heart. Obviously, one that God can still work with, but I think also one that's still sensitive to the needs of others.
Yeah.
And I started thinking to myself, this is a tough time to be doing either one of those things, like
Yeah.
where we are right now. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's always a tough time, but I feel like, especially right now, people keep on saying politically charged. I think that's kind of a new buzzword. Like, what are we doing in these politically charged times? But it's really true. So I've been trying to think, what does it mean right now to have that thick skin? What does it mean to have the soft heart? And what does it mean to kind of be that walking paradox? So one of the things that it's made me think of, and I know that we've heard this from Chris, from Jessica, from other people in the church, but it's not a message that I necessarily hear echoed everywhere, which is being offended or being easily offended is something that we need to guard against. So you do hear, sometimes that, you don't want to be thin-skinned. You kind of want to be a little bit tougher, and you want to be able to stand up for yourself. And I kind of take it more to be like if someone's picking on you directly. And obviously that's kind of a separate situation, but just kind of in general, the fact that we want to be like cognizant of the fact that we don't want to be easily offended or constantly offended. This is a message that I feel like is really important that I'm not hearing like shouted from the rooftops right now. And I feel like it should be.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that, the Bible says we should be forgiving people 70 times 7, right? And that's the concept of grace.
Yes.
And
this means you just keep forgiving because math is hard.
Yeah, it's interesting that we don't necessarily, well, yeah, and the point of it is that it goes on forever, right? He's not actually saying, oh, you carry the 7 and,
Can you imagine if you got up to the number and you're like, that's it, I'm done. Yes, no more forgiving people.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I
oh
can
my
now
goodness.
Be offended. Yes.
Well, and I've heard people say to me in my life, I've just forgiven people too many times. It's like, no, that's not what the Bible calls us to.
Yeah.
And this is the essence of grace. This is what we're supposed to be as Christians. And it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that people do things wrong, but it does mean that as graceful people who are ourselves offered grace by Jesus, we should be giving that same grace back to the people who we are supposed to be Jesus-like too.
Well, I feel like what always brings it home, like whenever I'm struggling with this, or I've read this in books sometimes, it's like, well, think of how many things you've been forgiven for. And it's not just maybe the ones that like publicly you've been forgiven for, or you actually had a relationship go south and you actually made amends in some public way. Think about all the little things, that maybe were just a passing thought, or, something that you shouldn't have said to someone, but somehow this got overlooked, or they like kind of gave you the benefit of the doubt. And then you kind of turn it back on yourself. And once you go through like a mental laundry list of all of those things, usually with any degree of self-awareness, it kind of puts everything else in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things that I think it's important, because it's almost seemed like being offended is something that people have been like striving for, or that we want to, find the next thing to be offended about. And I literally, as I'm saying this, I am like actually worried I'm going to offend someone by saying this statement. Like, it is like the deepest irony ever. This is me apologizing for saying I'm sorry. This is me saying we need to stop being offended. And I'm really afraid that message is going to offend somebody out there. And I'm not being ironic. I'm being 100% upfront with this.
Well, I can say that I've been talking about certain young adult groups with different people within
Mm-hmm.
our church. And one of the things that I've said that I really, really value, and because this is something I don't see in our society, I certainly don't see it amongst my peers, is a safe place for people to come and just express what they're thinking. Maybe they don't have all the information, but they don't want to be offensive to somebody. But
Hmm.
in this current culture, and especially where everybody's interacting over social media,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be offensive to somebody, and I want one of my biggest desires would be to have a place where we don't have to worry about that. I think talking in person is something that people severely underrate in this day and age because you understand so much more what the person means.
Oh, yes.
But that's
And
just one
it's
of
not
my
discoverable.
yeah
You're not going to
yeah
be
yeah yeah
able to look it up. Just a little
yeah.
e-discovery plug on there. No one's ever going to be able to go back and say, this is exactly what you said. I guess that's a double-edged sword because
Well, that's
people
true.
could
Yeah.
remember that differently. But the other thing that you get with face-to-face conversations that you don't get with anything else,
Mhm.
um, I'm kind of an empathetic person, probably to a degree. I'm trying to read and feel what everyone else in the room is feeling
Yeah.
to a point where I will start putting things on you that aren't even there because I
Mm.
think I'm reading signs for them. So there's a balance, with everything. But
And there's a lot of empathetic people out there right now, especially in our circles, in Christian circles.
yeah, and so you're trying to read people, and you're literally. I saw a great quote. It was like, I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm listening to when you're silent. I'm
Mm.
watching your facial expressions. I'm watching your body movements. I'm listening to your tone. And it kind of just went through like
Right.
this whole, all of these different ways of communication that you lose once that communication is just going through text or being posted on Facebook or something like that, which is in a way, Facebook or Instagram or any of these other mediums, they're one way communication. It's
Yeah.
like, here's my message. I'm stamping it up literally on this board. And this is a one way message from me to you. And you can tell me what you think about it. But it's
Hmm.
not a conversation.
Right.
And people try to make it that conversation by just adding comments. And obviously, it can get bad quickly, it can
Yeah.
spiral out of control
Yeah. In
quickly.
more ways than one, definitely.
Yeah. So I had something that I actually didn't post on my page. I don't know how it got there. I don't know if I maybe accidentally hit the share button on something.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past me. Like it's probably user error. I get it. But anyway, somehow something
Happens to the
got
best of
posted,
us.
right? Because there
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
comments. I didn't put anything
Right.
with it. It
Right.
just boom, it was on my page, and it was for the political party that I don't align with,
Mm.
and so it was very like an outlier, and so I had the people on my page who probably usually would disagree with me, even though I try to be like super neutral, were suddenly going like, yes, this is the message we wanted to
Oh
hear,
man.
and then other people were saying, the complete opposite, like, why are you changing? What's
Mm.
going on? And then there were people saying, let her change. You got to allow her to be her, and then I was
Mm.
like, hey guys, just FYI, I didn't post this. And nobody read that comment, and they just kept going and going and going, and I finally just deleted it because it became
Yeah.
like just a hornet's nest over.
That's that's a really interesting, like almost a social experiment. Like you didn't intend to
I
conduct it,
didn't.
but that's like a social experiment.
That's true. It actually did. I mean, and that's where I'm kind of like, was something nefarious going on? Like,
Yeah.
did somebody else jump on my page and like do this? I don't know exactly what
Yeah.
happened, but it really was an interesting social experiment just to see how everyone reacted. Um, I will say I did not lose any friends, like
Mm.
actual
Right.
friends
Right.
in real life or friends on Facebook over that whole debacle.
That means you have real friends. So good.
Yeah, well, thank you, but I also think it's probably because I'm trying way too hard to be neutral. But some other people who were commenting to each other, people who'd
Mm.
never met each other at all, were suddenly hitting each other's hot button issues, and they
Mm.
decided to stop being friends. So other people, relationships were broken via comments on Facebook, and I'm like, guys, this is not. This is not real life. So
Yeah. Yeah. The internet is fake. You all need to understand that.
So there was that. And then there was another situation where I was reading what someone had put on their page, and they said, um, basically, I need to always be doing more. Like, if
Mm.
my comments offend you, then I'm sorry. But I never want to look back and think like I could have done
Right.
even more
Right.
for this cause. And I really want it to be like, this is politics.
Yeah.
This is not religion.
Yeah.
This is not the hill you want to die on. I don't mean that in all the metaphorical way, I suppose. I just mean that
Sure.
in the joking way of, but literally, this is not kind of where you want to decide if I'm going to lose friends or if I'm going to offend people or if I'm going to be too brash or whatever. I'm going to do it over the vaccine. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
This is really not what we're supposed to be all
Well,
about.
and can't you still, don't mean to be controversial here, but can't you still care about somebody, whether or not they're making choices that you agree with?
That's true.
You don't necessarily have to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
But can't you, and especially us as Christians, I understand that everybody listening to this may not be Christian, but for those of us who are, it's just bigger than that. It's bigger than, I don't agree with the fact that they took the vaccine or they didn't take the vaccine, and, how do I grapple with that? And the vaccine is just, one of the examples that we're bringing up here. It could be anything.
Could be masks, could be school closures,
of this. Could be literally, could have nothing to do with COVID. Could have to do with our former president. Could have to do with anything.
Yeah.
Like, and these are politically charged times. I think you already brought that up. Like, these are times where that's what's on people's minds. And we have to ask ourselves, is that the most important thing?
Well, I mean, okay, I will say, I have not read all of Screwtape Letters. I have read
haven't either.
excerpts from it. And I almost feel like, in a way, no offense to wonderful C.S. Lewis, who we all love, but I feel like it might be a little bit heavy to read. I mean, just because it's from the perspective of a demon, like a senior demon, like helping out like a junior demon and saying, like, here's how to mess with people. So I don't think it's not like a beach read. You're not just going to like flip through it on vacation.
Post about it on Facebook. This was such a great light read.
Right, exactly.
Really helped me decompress.
Yeah, this is not going to help you decompress. That is very true. Yeah. Let's put that out there. But I mean, some things like that, they will kind of comment like, hey, if you want to get the Christians kind of off mission, start some infighting about little stupid stuff, and it could be, things that are related to the church, like maybe when you baptize, whether you do that as an infant or whether you let people make that choice, or it could be, political issues that are actually like outside the church.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of had a lot of respect for the churches that kind of major on the majors and minor on the minors, because we can all have a lot of different opinions. The chances that every single one of us is going to agree unanimously on every little aspect of church, and we are going to read every single verse and interpret it the exact same way. I mean, we're just not robots,
Right.
So that's never going to happen. So, but can we just agree that these like core tenets of the faith are what we care about, and these are the things that we're all going to sort of champion together, and let the rest of the stuff go?
Yeah. Well, and I want to bring up the story when Jesus was being blasted again by the Jewish leaders, and they were calling him, a Satan worshiper or something of the sort, because he was casting out devils. And Jesus was like, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but he said, "A house divided against itself will fall."
Yeah, it was kind of
It's
funny
biblical.
Because he was like, "I wouldn't do that. Wouldn't that hurt my own cause?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I always kind of thought that was funny. I was like, that's an odd thing to accuse him of.
It's funny too, because you can tell that they were resorting to like the very last thing. They were like, okay, we're just going to call him a Satan worshiper for casting out devils.
We're running out of material. We got to throw something on the wall that sticks. This is a bad one.
Yeah, absolutely. Those Jewish leaders.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like, and people are starting, I think, to kind of come over to this way of thinking that in a lot of ways, politics has become the new religion. Like when people used to say, like, religiously used to mean like regularly, like, oh, I drink coffee religiously every morning, right? Which I do, and every afternoon. But it's true.
You drink my share.
I do. Yes, I'm kind of taking for everybody. So, but yeah. It used to be that was kind of a word that you could use to mean, of the utmost importance, or
Right.
this is always a regular thing or not to be missed, or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm
Yeah.
not really sure what the old Urban Dictionary like definition of that would have been. And I feel like it's definitely gotten replaced with this is the most important expression of who you are.
Hmm.
And I fight against it. And I will say, I feel like I do have friends on both sides. And because I have friends on both sides and because I can see multiple perspectives on this, I feel like it helps moderate me. It helps moderate
Right.
where
Right.
I am with things. And I think it kind of helps keep my heart soft,
Yeah.
so that you can think like, oh, maybe I thought this particular law or this particular proposition or whatever, maybe I thought people were going to be taking advantage, and someone will tell me like, oh no, there's actually people
Yeah.
that, need to be helped by this. Are we ever going to keep out people who could take advantage of a situation meant to help others? No, of course not. You have to
Right.
kind of accept that that's just a reality. We live in an imperfect world, but it helps to have my heart be softened and to keep people in my life that think differently than me, that can kind of offer that perspective. I think the
Right.
last thing we want to do is narrow.
Yeah.
And yet there's all these memes out there that tell you like, if this isn't bringing joy and value to your life,
Oh, cut it out.
you do
Oh, yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So
Mm-mm.
cut it out and get down to just the bare bones, all Bekah all the time. And I'm like, well, that's quite like self-centered and
That's really going to fulfill you in the end. Yeah.
I mean, if someone were to say this is the best way to be in a marriage is to
Mm.
just cut out everything that just doesn't fulfill you and just be all about yourself, you would recognize it as terrible marriage advice. Well, I hope you would. I
Yeah.
hope people
Yeah.
would recognize.
Yes.
Maybe not. I don't know. If people were to say like the best way to be a parent is to be all about yourself, I mean, that's thank you. See, thank you for laughing.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that is absolutely laughable. You don't get to be selfish and be a parent. Like it's unfortunately just taken off the table
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
why do we think that at work or in friendships or in other aspects of life, pushing all these other people out and getting down to just me all the time and no outside influences and nothing that upsets me is gonna be the best way to go?
Yeah.
It's a little, I don't know, it's a little scary, but I don't think it helps moderate us.
Well, and this brings us back around to the topic of whether or not we should be offended and how offended we should be and all those sorts of things. And especially as Christians. And it brings me back also to my earlier point of wanting a place where we can have just open discussions,
Mm-hmm.
and not be, when I say that, I want to say that because it's not because, oh, I'm afraid to say something because people are going to find out that I have a horrible view or something like that.
Yeah.
It's because I don't want to be attacked for what I don't know or what I may not know. But I also don't want to be attacked for something that maybe I do know and they maybe don't know something about, but because they've heard something, they think, this particular thing or whatever. And I don't mean to point fingers, and I'm certainly not pointing any specific fingers, but I definitely don't even generally mean to point fingers. There are just conversations that need to be had, and I don't. And the question becomes, can we even have those discussions if we're not being thick-skinned as people, not letting things get through to us, but also not being caring and compassionate on the outside, not listening to what other people say, not listening to their stories, because their stories matter. People's stories do matter. They live these stories.
Yeah.
And so those things matter, but we have to be able to hear them, and we have to be able to not be offended, and everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. So,
Yeah, and this brings me
No, I was just going to say what makes one person's story necessarily more valid than somebody else's story. And we've even talked about that a little bit on previous podcast episodes, so you can go listen to that if you're interested. But yeah.
That's where I was going to go with it a little bit. It was just kind of the bird's eye view versus the worm's eye view that I mentioned before, because I've seen this even in my own workplace, where we've tried to have the uncomfortable racial discussions about, let's talk about where we are. Let's talk about how people of color are treated. Let's go ahead and dig into this. And I will say, I'm glad that they're setting up the discussion. They say, if you have questions, please bring them. And they have let people, talk about their questions, or, talk about if they understood, Martin Luther King to be sending one message and then us currently to be having a different message, and how do we reconcile that, and all of those kinds of things. So they've been open and kind of welcoming that feedback. But I have seen certain people that I feel like are very like data driven. They have their idea of, how many, people that have police brutality against a certain race or another. And, someone wants to say, yeah, there's those, statistics, but let me tell you my actual story. This is my lived experience. It happened.
Yeah.
And people want to push it away kind of in the name of statistics. And that's the example of kind of having your mind be open to the data, but not having that soft, pliable heart. And of course, there's even a problem with your mind being open to the data, because at this point we have so many different sources of data and so much misinformation as well as information. So it would be very, very tough to know, for absolute certain that you have checked all and every source and you absolutely have the truth. That's very, very hard to know right now. But even if you did, I would still say you owe your fellow man, woman, child, whoever you're talking to, the time to sit down and genuinely listen to their story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to say. And it's not necessarily that all the statistics are wrong. Maybe they are, because like you said, there's so much information out there, whether or not it's misinformation or information. I'll leave that up to you and your own research. But whether or not you believe it, whether or not you buy into it, you do owe, as a fellow human, the other people who are on the other side of this, the chance to hear them, the chance to hear what they have to say, because you could be wrong. What makes you think that you're right, or that your story is the only right one? Or that anybody's story is the only right one. If you're taking one person's story as the absolute fact.
Yeah. And it's part of what, if listening, I would say, if it comes kind of more difficult, and, I know everything is there's a lot of tension right now, just keep in your mind, be curious. There's never anything wrong, or there's never anything that's going to compromise your beliefs with just asking questions and being curious. And for the most part, you're not going to, I would say, offend anyone by asking for more of their story.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a really good tactic to use if it doesn't come naturally to you, to just continue to ask more questions. And there's one other thing that I wanted to share, and this is something that it's a verse, it's a passage that I would say is probably one of my favorite verses in the Bible. I have it printed out and laminated and cheesily decorated. I don't know that cheesily is actually an adverb, but I'm determined to make everything an adverb. I don't know why. But it's kind of it's something that brought me a lot of encouragement, because it's kind of helped to bring me down from those states of feeling like you're in this tense conflict, ridden conversation, or you're feeling a lot of anxiety about whatever it is that you're going through. So it was encouraging to my dad. This has kind of been passed down generationally. He gave it to me. I gave this passage to Emma. She actually took the printed version of it. And she would take it with her, and bring it, to school when she had a test, and just kind of like read it ahead of time for a test. So it's gonna sound familiar. It's from the Sermon on the Mount, so you probably know where I'm going with this, but just take it in and kind of let it sit for a second. So this is Matthew 6:25. I tell you, do not worry. Don't worry about your life and what you will eat or drink, and don't worry about your body and what you will wear. Isn't there more to life than eating? Aren't there more important things for the body than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They don't plant or gather crops. They don't put away crops in storerooms, but your Father who is in heaven feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than they are? Can you even add 1 hour to your life by worrying? Which I kind of find ironic, by the way, because I don't know why you'd want to. Yeah, like why would you want to extend your life if you're spending your whole life worrying? Like, add 1 more hour of worrying. Anyway, why do you worry about clothes? See how the wildflowers grow. They don't work or make clothing, but here's what I tell you. Not even Solomon in all of his royal robes was dressed like one of these flowers. Is that how God dresses the wild grass? Won't he dress you even better? Your faith is so small. After all, the grass is here only today. Tomorrow it is thrown into the fire. So don't worry. Don't say, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? People who are ungodly run after all those things. Your Father who is in heaven knows that you need them. But put God's kingdom first. Do what he wants you to do. Then all those things will also be given to you. So don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. It's hard for me to let things sit. I can't let things sit. I can't let them simmer.
That's okay. It's okay. No, that is a passage that I absolutely live by. I love that, and I love what he says there. Do not look at the birds of the air. What do they do? Do they worry? No, he provides for them, and if he dresses the grass that well, he's going to dress you even better. Things like that, and that's absolutely how I approach my life. Like, and I'm not saying I don't have any worries or concerns ever.
Yeah.
But
Andrew's got it down.
I wish I had it down. No, but we're able to relax in the knowledge that our lives are stewarded. Well, I mean, we steward our lives, but our lives are watched over, are planned, are controlled basically by God. Now, we do have free will. I realize that in saying that, it almost sounds like I'm saying we don't have free will. We do have free will. But God directs us, and he directs us even more if we let him.
Yeah.
And the way I live personally is, I think, and especially in accordance with that passage, if he made me, then he knows how I should best be stewarded. He knows how I should best, live my life. And so when I say stewarded, I said, we steward our lives. That's because we've been given our lives. But if we give our lives back to him, then he becomes the steward of our lives, and we're able to live the way he intends for us to live.
Well, and I feel like you said something in there where mentally I just kind of feel like there's that cat with their nails in the ceiling that's kind of so freaked out about everything. And I mean, it's a big mental load that all of us have been carrying, worrying about COVID, worrying about the election, worrying about all of these things. Like there's always something new. I mean, people started saying, okay, just take some time to shut off the news. And I mean, I had to do this way back in 2004, 2005 when John was in Iraq, and I had to shut off the news then just because it was so triggering, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of these questions, if it's not what will we wear, if it's who's going to be elected, I mean, you could fill this passage in really with any number of questions, and all of it, God is kind of like putting his hand on it and saying, that's not for you to worry about. That's not for you to carry around, even as a mental load of just thinking about these kinds of things all the time.
Yeah.
So what I try to let that passage do is pull me like that cat, get the claws out of the ceiling, and kind of have that feeling of a little bit of transcendence. I know that sounds like a strange word to use right now, but a little bit of transcendence to be like, your life is bigger than just these little things.
Yeah.
It kind of push back and get a little bit of perspective to know, if you're really worried about all these things, maybe on some level you think it's up to you to solve.
Right.
And we can't, and so we're just holding these things that we can't solve, and we think we can't put them down, and we're carry them together. We still can't, get through all of it, and there's no reason to. And I feel like this passage it just lets you you can put them down and you can step away and you can realize that like you don't need to solve them.
Yeah. And that's what I love about it. I mean, it's like you said, it's so easy to live in fear, especially in this day and age with any myriad of things. It could be your own personal problems, it could be problems of the world, could be anything. And, I started listening to the news very seriously when COVID hit.
Bad timing.
Bad timing. I know. Timing. But it was the timing for me where I realized, okay, this is serious. I need to take it seriously. I need to pay attention to it. And after a while, it sort of became, it wasn't the entirety of my being, but it was what I was spending most of my time on. And it was, I wouldn't say I was living so much in fear, but I wound up living in fear. I wound up thinking, okay, this is something big. This is crazy. Dare I say, I thought perhaps the world was going to end, things like that.
Oh, yeah. And of course, a lot of people did.
A lot of our minds
go very
there,
apocalyptic.
And it wasn't like I was it wasn't like I went crazy, but I was,
to be clear,
I didn't like, after a while, who I had become. I didn't like the sorts of things that I was listening to. I was hearing from different people that I was, saying things and acting in ways that I didn't want to say and act.
Yeah.
And so I did eventually, I stopped listening to the news. I stopped listening to, political people. I stopped all of it. I tuned it out. And I also tuned out noise. So I tuned out things like entertainment that was, just there. Mm-hmm. I tuned out things like that. And I sort of streamlined my life into the things that I felt really mattered, that I really was, passionate and trying to stay in tune with. And I started focusing on my own communities. I started focusing on my friends. I started focusing on making, my life and the life of those around me better, because I realized that's what I have a certain amount of control over. Yeah. And not that I need to control it, but like I said, we can give that control back to God, and, God uses us. Mm-hmm. to fulfill his vision of how this world should be. If he's the creator, I like to think of it as like, because I'm a writer, I like to think of God as the author of, of this world. And so, he knows best how to conclude the story and how to write the story and, write your story even. So that's how I have liked to see it. And I stopped, entirely. I haven't really gone back. And I don't really look back.
Yeah.
Because, now I've come away and I've sort of calmed down, and I've sort of, just began living my life the way that I have felt called to live it. Mm-hmm. And that's not, self-indulgent. That's a whole other thing.
You started small. You started with, where can I affect some change? Where do I have, where do I actually have control? Yeah.
It was practical things. And I look back now on who I was hanging out with, mm-hmm. Who I was, talking to, and the things that I was even hanging on to from, previous times in my life. And I don't regret my decision. I don't regret not, having walked away from those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it helps a lot. It dovetails with the do not worry to be able to find a place to sink in and take action.
Yeah.
So, whatever you feel like, you can back away a little bit from these things if they're causing you to worry, causing you anxiety, and figure out what is some action that I can take, however small it may be, where I can actually see some positive change.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just calling someone up that you have been meaning to reach out to, that needs to hear from you. And mm-hmm. maybe it's only a phone call, but maybe that phone call means a lot to them. Or mm-hmm. maybe it's, bringing a meal to someone who is really could just use it. Could be I don't know, think of a busy mom. There's probably not a busy mom in your life who could not use an extra hand or an extra meal.
It's true.
Even if you're not going through something that would qualify as, something that merits a meal train, I'm sure there's someone in their life.
If they had a night off, I'm sure that they would be, way happier.
They would. Trust me. Speaking as a mom. So
I'm not the mom. Yeah. Listen to the mom here.
But yeah, I think once you can kind of channel some of that energy into action, especially if you can just see some kind of small change because of it, some kind of smile or thank you or just appreciation, um, it's so much better than just kind of spinning in circles, feeling that helpless, worried feeling.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. And I love that. And I really love that passage. So I want to thank you for reading it. And I want to just, again, close, uh, unless you have anything else to say. I want to close with the idea of just being open to those around us, being helpful, being courteous, trying not to read our own lives into somebody else's life, to not be
that's true.
offended.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
At least not at first.
Yeah.
You know, take your time. Be slow to anger. That's another thing the Bible says. Be
Mm-hmm.
slow to anger, and really just think about what it means in this context to be graceful. And I hope that we have added to that conversation, or at least helped you to think about it a little bit more. I think I can certainly say for myself that this has helped me to think about it more.
Yeah.
So,
And if somebody says something that can be taken more than one way, and
yes.
one of those ways hurts or offends you, try to just assume they meant it the other way. I have to tell myself this. I tell
Yeah.
myself on a regular basis, you know what? Maybe they didn't mean that the way that I'm taking it. And I have to take a step back.
Always
And
assume the
yeah,
best.
yeah.
Not expect, but, prepare for the worst, but, assume the best. And on that note, I also do want to say, if we have said anything that offended or upset you in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to just ask you that if you're comfortable doing it, pray about it or research it because, or reach out to us because,
Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah,
leave a comment. I want to know.
I would
Reach
be
out.
more than happy to engage because honestly, uh, all I want to do is have a discussion.
Yeah.
And that's what this podcast is about. And I'm so glad to be able to be a part of this and be able to talk to you guys. So with that, I do want to close us out, and I'm going to read just the blessing of the Aaronic benediction from Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you his peace. And we do pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.